Analysis, the lockdown has had a negative impact on the country's economy and devastated the lives and livelihoods of millions of people. Many countries, especially in Europe, are imposing restrictions once again as they struggle to curb rising COVID-19 infections. Analysts say economic gains made since the first wave are rapidly reversing. Now, to talk to us about the possible economic impact of the second wave, we're joined via Skype by political analyst Khaya Sithole. A very good morning to you, Khaya. Concerns about a possible return to a hard lockdown. Any possibility of that happening?
Look, I think obviously the health minister and his team are the ones that we're going to have to make the call on whether a hard lockdown is indeed warranted. But I think the reality is that for as long as infections rise, that is something that cannot be discounted. And the question is going to be, what did we learn from the first hard lockdown? And if it is to be implemented, what is it that needs to be done differently in order to at least avoid the type of economic fallout that we saw associated with the initial lockdown?
The health minister saying yesterday that we should await a further announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa. What can we expect there?
I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what it is that the president is looking at and what's going to inform his decision. But of course, he has to continuously keep us aware and make us alert that we are still living at the height of a pandemic. And if, of course, we are seeing the numbers escalating at the rate that they are escalating, he needs to be able to utilize the instruments that are available at his disposal. The Disaster Management Act does give him particular powers. And if it is going to be the way forward, that perhaps some hard lockdown measures need to be re-implemented, then that is what he has to consider. But it is difficult to speculate at this stage what exactly it is that the health minister has told him, what it is that the scientists are looking at, and what it is that the government thinks is feasible and practical in light of the festive season coming up, but also the need to preserve some form of economic mobility for a lot of people.
Yeah, just in terms of global comparisons, are we supposed to be alarmed at numbers such as 6,079 cases in a one-day cycle?
No, I think the problem with global comparisons is that it's really a function of what each country is testing, the frequency and the volume of testing, and how accurate the data is. And I do not think that there's anyone who can objectively vouch for the data on a global level to say this is the most accurate data at any point in time. There's also the question of, well, what is the size of the population in relation to other countries that you might be trying to compare to? So it's really a difficult exercise, and some people have said it's an undesirable exercise because it doesn't tell you about what's happening in Germany or the United Kingdom, because things may be completely different. They're in a completely different season. For example, we're in summer and they're in winter. So those types of global comparisons are just really difficult to justify.
Yeah, you're also a numbers person. What are your thoughts about the statistic models that the minister says they're using? He says they're looking at the percentage of positive infections and numbers of admissions in hospitals and calculation of fatalities. Are you satisfied with the credibility of the processes that are being undertaken?
I can't possibly comment on the credibility of it, but I'm hoping that obviously the minister is using the type of data that can stand the test of time. So if everybody had to interrogate it, it should be the type of data that they can defend whoever is working with from the side of the statisticians and also even the Department of Health. So we are not in a position to actually vouch or discredit the numbers themselves. We just simply do not know enough.
Yeah. With less than a few days before the end of 2020, would you say this year was a write-off for some businesses in terms of profitability and commercial success?
Unfortunately, the reality is that when you walk on shopping centers, I was walking through Rosebank Mall yesterday, there are far too many shop windows that have closed down, and I think that's a reflection of the fact that for as long as the hard economic lockdown in particular was the one that we were living under, the footfall and the foot traffic that makes a lot of these businesses viable just didn't materialize. And even after we had moved on from the hard economic lockdowns, far too many people had either lost their jobs or were now suffering from what we referred to as income insecurity, which means that you cannot be assured that your salary will be available for the next 3 or for the next 4 months. So that means that you start stepping gently in relation to what it is that you want to purchase, what it is that you want to prioritize. So the long-term effect of that is that people are going to be very cautious with their spending their money, at least until we are over the pandemic altogether and economic activity recovers to a level where people are now getting jobs, where income insecurity isn't as acute as it is right now.
Yeah, another area of caution, of course, is traveling, even if it's around the country. Do you think, and I know you said you can't predict what the president will say, there's another possibility of restrictions on travel, air travel especially?
Look, I think obviously we are hoping that by this time we are able to narrow down the data analysis on a very granular level. So somebody should be able to say that given the protocols that have been applied in air travel, for example, what has been the infection rates that can be associated with air travel before you can then justify saying that actually let us ban air travel in particular. And I think obviously now that you've relaxed these hard lockdowns, if you want to revert back to them, people are going to then interrogate why this sector, why that particular industry, and why that particular form of economic activity, for example. So the burden on the state is much higher now for them to justify going back to where they were, because now people are going to say, but when you said that this could now be done, we assume that you had the data that backed up that analysis. So now when you come back and say it shouldn't be done anymore, tell us what you've seen, tell us whether any things can be done to improve that particular condition before we revert to the type of lockdown that could see the grounding of flights, for example.
Jabir, we thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Khaya Sithole there for you for a conversation we'll continue to have. We're also asking you a question about that. Do you feel that you're more prepared now?